Thank you. Thank you very much, Reverend Jeannie. Hi, folks.
Good morning.
Sometimes the sanctuary is packed, and then there are other times, like today, when we're few in number, but I almost enjoy these times when it happens because we can be very intimate with one another, and I feel close and am able to connect with each one of you. So I welcome these opportunities when they come. I'd also like to welcome the newcomers. Hi, how are you? Hey. So today I want to talk to you about spiritualism and, excuse me for just a minute, I'm going to put some correction in here. You better quit. That's enough. Stop. And that'll last about 2 seconds. So, when we first come into spiritualism, we begin to learn the nuts and bolts about spiritualism. We learn that spiritualism is a science and a philosophy and a religion. And very shortly after we learn some of the hardcore aspects of spiritualism and what makes spiritualism what it is, we begin to understand that it's more than that. It becomes a way of life. Spiritualism as a way of life, as we've come to understand it, is our foundation, the rock upon which we can eternally stand, knowing that we can depend on it, stand upon it, and build from it. Now, spiritualism has an interesting language. The metaphysical world, the New Age movement, and has brought some of these words to the forefront. We use words like enlightenment and unfoldment and spiritual growth. But what are the component factors of all of those things? How do we get there from here? And what, if anything, stands in our way? So today I want to point out some ways to achieve some of those goals that you may have to become more spiritually adept, and what indeed may be inhibiting us from moving forward as well as we would like to. Very often we use the analogy of an onion and peeling the layers of an onion to get down to the root of the core of whatever it is we're trying to reach. And within us, we know that our core, the very center of who we are, is infinite intelligence, is God. But yet we don't go around and call ourselves, I am God. Although we could. Because that's exactly who we are. And if we did, what would happen? People would say, well, that person has a really big ego. You know what an ego is? Ego is the perception you have of yourself. I think all of you have heard that story about something to the effect of God hid himself within us, and that was the last place we would look, right? And it's true. But where does ego come from? What are these layers upon layers upon layers that cloud us from understanding who we truly are? and the core of our being? Well, they come from our social community and our environment. When you were young, you were taught what's acceptable, what isn't acceptable, and from there you built upon that and you formed perceptions of your beliefs, what you thought was proper and acceptable, and you learned very quickly, of course, what wasn't. Right? So today we're going to learn a new word. Bitvor. B-I-T-V-O-R. I made this word up. It's not really a word. But it's going to make sense in a minute. Because Bitvor stands for beliefs, ideas, thoughts, values, opinions, and rules. And those are the components and the elements of ego. Anybody ever met anybody that they didn't like? Tell the truth. Yes. Well, what was going on there? Your Bitvor was banging into his Bitvor or her Bitvor, and the two Bitvors just clashed. You want it again? Beliefs, ideas, thoughts, values, opinions, and rules. That's what your ego is made up of. Now, your ego hates to be wrong. Your ego is always on the defense. And it's always there with you as your perceived protector. Your ego is actually fear-based. You know what fear is? False evidence appearing real. That's what fear is. What are the components of fear? Anger. God bless you. Frustration. And there's one more. Hurt. Those are the components of fear. So when someone is angry at you, what's screaming? Their Bitvor. Their ego. That's what's screaming. When somebody is hurt, what happens? A lot of times they go on the defensive, right? That's their ego. And of course, I'm putting it out there and saying they, because none of us are involved in any of this, right? So what do we do with all this, knowing all of this? Well, let me give you, the best way to explain it would be to give you an example. Let's suppose, as an example, you were told as a child that you were a wonderful singer. Your parents said, "Oh, you have such a beautiful voice, and you sing so beautifully." And of course your parents' friends said, "Oh yes, you have a beautiful voice, and how wonderful is that?" And that's great. Can you learn anything from that? Not really. I mean, it's a feel-good thing, but you don't really learn from it. How can you improve your voice? Well, you go to school. And what does a school do for you? It teaches you. And it says, in those lessons, if you will fluctuate more strongly here, or you will breathe differently, or whatever the case, your voice will improve, right? And we have We have this opportunity. That's what a teacher does for you. And what we miss in our day-to-day lives is we have ample opportunity almost on a daily basis to learn from individuals that will give us this information, but we may not like the way in which it's presented. See, you can't learn from someone who has exactly the same bit force as you have. Can't learn from that. Your best teachers are those individuals out there, I call them aides, angels in disguise, and believe me, some of them are in deep disguise, very deep, that bump against your bit for and give you an opportunity to learn from that. And if you can see through their criticism, if you can see through their fear, see through their anger, see through their hurt, see through their frustration with you, if you can see through all of this, then you may be able to glean something from it. H. Gordon Burroughs, in his book called Becoming a Spiritualist, it's probably in the bookstore, it's one of our foundational books here, says that spiritualism is the religion of self-culture. Albert Einstein, I love that guy, says that ego equals a lack of knowledge. A massive ego, anybody know anybody with a big ego? A massive ego equals a massive lack of knowledge. So the reason why I bring all of this to you is because those individuals that maybe you don't understand, you don't get along with, you don't relate to, you don't click with, are your best teachers. And that being the case, those are the individuals that you need to ask, well, what do you think? What's your opinion about this? And that's how you're going to learn. And that's how you're going to improve. You can't improve by singularly just holding on to what you know and never reaching out and learning something new. Every time that happens, when you bump into someone and your bit for crashes with their bit for, what's going on? How do you know? What happens to you when you get frustrated? What happens? What's going on with you? How do you know you're frustrated? How do you know you're angry? How do you know you're hurt? How do you know that these things are going on? Well, your body is your indicator, right? You know, your respiration may increase, your heart may pound harder. You have thoughts that are probably not the kindest of thoughts. And these are your greatest opportunities to stop right then and realize that what's going on there is your ego is jumping in. Your bit for is jumping in and saying, I got this, I'll protect you. But that's a lie. It's false. That's not who you are, and you don't even need that. So we need to begin to look at things a little bit differently. I'll give you another example. In the stock market, when a stock goes up and it's being successful, people want to jump in and buy it. And when a stock goes down, what do we want to do? We want to get rid of it. We want to sell it. And that's exactly the opposite of what you ought to be doing. Exactly. So those people who understand that have trained themselves to understand that when a stock goes down and it's in the crapper, this is absolutely the best buying opportunity they're going to have. Because when you're at the bottom, there's only one way to go, is up, right? What you're reacting to superficially when it's high and you want to buy, and when it's low and you want to sell, that's your bit board, that's your ego. See, ego is very fluid and very insidious, and it approaches us from all different angles and at all different times. It's not always the stereotypical way we think about ego. And so if there are individuals out there that can train themselves to be disciplined investors, and again, I'm using this as an example, to become very successful in the financial world, why can't we use this same planogram, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and apply it to our own lives in managing ourselves to develop our own self-culture? Is this making sense to you guys? And believe me, there's no lost opportunity out there to develop our self-culture. There's always plenty of opportunity, because there's usually someone out there that is going to rub your rhubarb, or make an attempt to rub your rhubarb and poke at you. And there are days when I've said, Lord, don't give me any more opportunities. I've had quite enough today, thank you very much. Right? But that's what they are, as learning opportunities. So, we learned a new word today, and we learned about the components of fear, what fear is. We learned about the components of the ego and the elements, and how they interact with other people's elements of their egos. And in closing, I came across a poem that I think is apropos. It comes from Family Friend Poems, and I'd like to read it to you. It's called How to Fight an Ego. Have you ever fought an ego? It's a pretty tough thing to beat. It has no face, no head, no heart. It has no hands or feet. You cannot see it with your eyes, no matter how long you stare. And though you cannot touch it, it will always let you know it's there. An ego will fight dirty. An ego does not care. It will kick and stomp and bite you, but it's invisible, so beware. An ego's really ugly, although it has no face. It lives and breathes and haunts you from its own time and space. The only way to defeat it is to leave its ugly home. And this, my friends, is what is made of flesh and blood and bone. Turn your back and walk away. Don't sing its ugly song. It's going to take all of your might before it's really gone. The only way to kill it, it's hard, but you must try, is to open your mouth, take a deep breath, and firmly say goodbye.